Hello, School Transportation Nation. Tony Corpin here, publisher and president of School Transportation News. We're glad you made it to the podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. Got my excellent co-host, Mr. Ryan Gray, with me today, and we'll be talking with Al Karam, Transportation Director for Shenendehowa Central School District in New York. Ryan, we're fresh off of the TSD Conference, and man, it was a whirlwind of action, and then Thanksgiving, and here we are headed right into the holidays. So happy December, my friend.
Happy December to you. And we're entrenched in working on our buyer's guide and our January 24 issues. So, no rest for the weary, but we'll be definitely looking forward to a week off around Christmas time. I can't wait.
Yeah, I know we're talking STN Expo. I know that feels like a summer away, but gosh, we're going to blink and we're going to be here. So we are actually planning on opening up the STN Expo attendee registration in January, I think mid-January timeframe. So we'll keep you all posted, nation, when we do that. But keep an eye on the website, stnexpo.com. We got Indianapolis going to be May 31st through June 4th. And also our marquee show, STN Expo in Reno. That's July 12th through the 17th. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone out there in school transportation land back in the summer for some fun in the sun and maybe some education. We got lots of stuff happening. Green Bus Summit, our Transportation Director Summit. We're going to launch a light version of our Bus Technology Summit, which you might remember from COVID days. It feels like an eternity ago, but we're going to start bringing in more tech specific to the show in Indianapolis, which then will transition to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2025. So a lot happening over here. I know Ryan and I were talking also on speakers for the Transporting Students with Disabilities Conference, which, not that isn't a year away, but you got to be planning early, right, Ryan? It's just an ongoing process.
Absolutely. And I have a short list, not quite ready to go live with it yet, but stay tuned. I think certainly it will pack the seats once again with some great content.
All right. Well, before we dive into headlines, we have a message from our sponsor, TransFinder. Do you remember a time when you could just cherry pick the best solution to run your school transportation operation? The best routing software may be one company. The best parent app could be another company. Those days are over. TransFinder said the old way of doing business doesn't work for today's busy and burdened school transportation departments. They need one partner, one solution. TransFinder has embraced this approach for years now, building award-winning solutions like Route Finder Plus, the driver app Wayfinder, parent app Stop Finder, and inventory management solution Service Finder. They also have field trip management solutions, Trip Finder, and Viewfinder, which provide critical routing information to other stakeholders in the district. Add to this TransFinder's award-winning hardware and industry's best support and service. You have the ingredients that make up one partner, one solution. It's not just a slogan. It's TransFinder's way of doing business. Learn more by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or calling 800-373-3609. That's 800-373-3609. Remember, one partner, one solution. All right, we're back. Ryan, let's talk headlines, man. What's going on out there in school transportation world? Where do you want to kick off?
I guess some of the bigger news of the past week. A lot of folks know, of course, about EPA Phase 2, which is going into effect. The latest round of regulations from the federal government on emission standards for heavy-duty vehicles and engines. We know that there is a proposed rule for Phase 3, which takes those rules from Phase 2 that go through 2027, looking 2028 to 2032. Those are proposed rules. A couple senators in D.C. last week, Senators Alex Padilla and Sheldon Whitehouse, both Democrats, Padilla from California and Whitehouse from Rhode Island. They called on EPA last week to pass the strongest regulations possible. So obviously, folks already right now are wondering what they're going to do in school bus land specifically to adhere to 2027 rules, basically, or the 2024 through 2027 rules of the phase two. And here we have politicians already, really pushing hard for the strongest regulations possible for phase three. Tony and you and I have been talking a lot about this and talking a lot about with folks around the industry. In terms of electric, obviously, that's where everyone's pushing, and that's where these senators, obviously, they're talking about zero emissions. We know, though, that it's not ready yet everywhere and for all buses, and certainly there's just no way for all the OEMs to produce that many. As I'm looking at, I mentioned earlier, the buyer's guide, and I do my annual survey of OEMs, and unofficially we had about 40,200 school buses produced.
It's a big number, Ryan. That feels like more than usual.
And that includes, MFSA-Bs as well. But still, you're looking at, high 30s for school bus builds, if not more. There's still a couple of manufacturers I'm still at this date trying to get some numbers from. But when you're talking about 31,500 or so Type Cs and Type Ds, and other 6,500 or so Type As, that's a lot of school buses. And in the cursory numbers, looking at electric, certainly those numbers are going up, but still only 2,300 or so, give or take, produced. And this is from November 1st, 2022 through October 31st of this year. And we keep hearing about the promise and OEMs saying, "Oh, we're going to be able to take on the lion's share of electric school bus production." But when, right? And how much of it is being propped up by the EPA money? Again, conversations we've been having for weeks, months, years now. But it just shows this latest push from at least these two. Well, there's actually several dozen lawmakers that are led by Padilla and White House in the Senate, who are calling for, again, the strongest rules possible. And they're talking electric. But how are we going to get there? And we were talking the other day, Tony. It's no surprise to anyone or no secret that, as we head into 2024, there will essentially be only one game in town when you want propane school buses. And that's really been looked at as, I know the propane folks don't like to use the word bridge, but in terms of a bridge fuel to get to zero emissions. And certainly as we look down, the road and look at the impact of renewable fuels and potentially some additives that can go into the mix, that we can get to zero emissions without, simply going to electric. But today, for the school bus industry, zero emissions means electric. And, we know that we just can't get there. And in 2035, in some states, it's a little earlier than that, when you're looking at to go all electric with all electric new purchases. It just, it's mind boggling of how we're going to get there, especially when we're looking at, waiting on Cummins. The industry is waiting with bated breath for Cummins to come out with its agnostic engine, going to come out with gasoline first. Supposedly 2025, which means propane we won't see for another year or two after that. What's going to happen in the meantime?
I don't know, Ryan. I'm hearing rumblings that they're calling it octane, right? Octane gas. So octane might actually be out in 2024.
Okay.
So we will see. I'm hearing rumblings out there.
Maybe late 24.
Maybe. But that's what I'm hearing. I'm thinking 25. I think they've fast tracked this octane product because it affects the consumer automotive markets, which they are highly motivated to sell with that, that Duramax diesel as it transitions in the Dodge product. They're going to start moving that new octane engine into those vehicles, which, hopefully at STN Expo Indianapolis, we'll get a tour of that Dodge Ram plant where cool. That octane engine will actually be built. So I have a feeling we might have some fun things in store for our attendees if they're coming out to STN Expo Indy to see how the sauce is made there at that plant. But it'll be interesting to see. But to your point, Ryan, talking to engine manufacturers, manufacturers. Roush Clean Tech is really the only game in town for propane at this point. The PSI has been sunsetted, so pretty much IC and Thomas are waiting for Cummins propane solution to be ready for prime time. And, the timeline of that is basically a moving target. I think nobody really has an exact timeline. It's just, Cummins is obviously prioritizing octane, and that's where the bread is buttered, as they say, right? So, So we're going to see how it plays out for the marketplace, but where does that leave the customer that may be interested in buying propane? So you got to go to Bluebird and buy it from there, or you have to wait and you have to just hedge and kind of keep doing the way you have to do it. But some places, like we talked about, they don't have the option to wait. You got to make a decision and go all in. And there's not many other options on the table. So this is a very, precarious situation that the industry is in, and that transportation directors are going to have to make, like it or not. You got two choices, right? You go diesel or you're going electric, and diesel at some point is going to be not an option just based on what Cummins is producing, right? They're going to produce a limited amount of Cummins diesel products. Thomas obviously has Detroit diesel, so you might see some more Detroit diesel entering the market to bridge that gap. But it's a very interesting situation. I've never seen it in my career at STN, almost 20 years. You either, right? It's
absolutely
strange.
And when we're having this conversation, we see this the kind of the hand wringing from the engine manufacturers at the California Air Resources Board level. So, along lockstep with EPA. In fact, EPA follows CARB with a lot of its regulations. CARB kind of sets the standard. And right now you're talking about, Tony, states that won't have a diesel option. Well, we've mentioned recently that Oregon is one of the 13 states that adheres to CARB air emissions regulations. They were supposed to, here in a month's time, January 1st, 2024, prohibit diesel sales. Well, they pushed that back a year. And this goes back to ongoing meetings that CARB is having with engine manufacturers, with vehicle manufacturers. They're saying, hey, we don't have another product that meets the requirements. So this has kind of caused CARB to, I won't say pause, but definitely there's a lot of discussions going on right now. And Oregon specifically cited that. Also, a lot of pressure from entities such as like the Oregon People Transportation Association that said, hey, you're regulating this and we're going to have no options. We can't, you're basically telling us we have to buy electric and there's no other propane, or very limited propane options. Of course, that's music to the ears of like a Bluebird or a Microbird. But if you don't happen to be that client, or you don't have, the support you feel you need from in that area, in your local area from the dealer or whatever the case might be, that really hamstrings school districts, and they're trying to set purchase plans. And another thing that we've talked about, Tony, is, when we're seeing the buses, not being delivered for 12 to 18 months after the purchase order went through, but traditionally it was more of like a 3, 4, 5, maybe 6-month time frame. I mean, that's a diametric shift. And we've talked about that in the past where, districts perhaps need to look at how and when they purchase. No longer can you put out POs in January, February and expect to receive the buses, before the summer and get them prepped for the new school year. If you're purchasing buses today, they might not be going into service or not be available even, and not in the fleet for service for, another school year. So again, all of these pressures are really reaching ahead right now. And we see a lot of folks that, of course, where they can, if they're not in one of those CARB states, they're going to double down on diesel. I've been talking to a lot of folks over the past year, and they're going all in, and they're riding the diesel train as long as they can.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, Ryan. I know we just came out of TSD, and obviously we're talking special needs, and you see type A vehicles, and we saw a lot of Type A vehicle electric out on the market. Green Power, BYD, Microbird, Collins on that new Ford Transit. So there's a lot of vehicles that are presenting themselves in the Type A market on the electric platform, which is an interesting play because traditionally, obviously, you've seen a lot of gasoline in the use cases and some diesel as well. But now you've got Ford and GM, who are your pretty much proprietary chassis providers, which we went through the whole chassis shortage spike. I feel like maybe that's kind of gotten a little better from what I gather, and the timelines are better, but we'll see if the pendulum doesn't swing again. Obviously, the United Auto Workers strike and some other kind of effects could slow down production depending on what the outcomes are there. But I'd be very curious to see if that doesn't increase the amount of Type A school bus purchasing. If you can't get the traditional C, does that mean people are going to try to go after and buy more A's or larger capacity A vehicles? So these are all very interesting tactics that I see people leveraging. And we also have seen the advent and the growth, hyperbolic growth of alternative student transportation, non-yellow, using vans, taxi services, car services. It's just SUV. There's just so much of that, and it's so prevalent now as a mainstream transportation supplement. And by all means, no, they're not saying, hey, we're better than school buses. They want people on school buses, but they're acting as kind of a stopgap. And I'm not sure there's even, the gap's ever going to close. I feel like it's only widening with driver shortage and a lot of these other aspects. And the need, obviously, at the TSD conference, they talked a lot about children with disabilities and homelessness. McKinney-Vento, we've seen a spike in awareness or children being identified, and there's more and more of that happening. And as the demand increases, services like this are going to increase as well. So they're all very interesting factors as we see our market evolve, Ryan.
Absolutely. And you know, a lot of that alternative transportation, again, is driven by the driver shortage. And that's another reason for Type A's. I mean, we were talking about, you know, the electric versus gas and diesel, but we know that there has been growing interest, at least over the last several years, of turning to more Type A vehicles because you don't need to have drivers with CDLs. And that basically you can onboard those folks a lot quicker, where you, of course, you can find them. So yeah, all of these issues, it's interesting to see how they all are related and interrelated and come together to paint this bigger picture and just shine a light on the many of the challenges that are facing our audience.
Yeah, other kind of big items that I got out of TSD, I hosted a technology panel, and we were talking about trends in technology and the topic of school bus Wi-Fi, E-rate, which if you guys haven't heard, the FCC passed E-rate funding for school bus Wi-Fi, which we're still waiting for comment from FCC on some of the details on that. So that's forthwith. I imagine we'll probably see something in early part, maybe January of 2024 on that. And we'll get you more info out on stnonline.com for all the latest news and info on the website. But, you know, as we come together, many school districts that we talked to said, hey, I'm interested in Wi-Fi on school buses if there is funding that's going to take care of this in perpetuity, which, you know, the FCC has never allotted funding through E-rate for this. And now here it is, approved by the FCC 3-2. So guys, definitely keep an eye on this evolving discussion around school bus Wi-Fi. Lots of chatter about it at the TSD conference. A lot of directors interested in it, learning more, taking advantage of it. Also talking Medicaid reimbursement. I know we were talking with Arby Creech from Osceola down in Florida, who was at Brevard County, a big one there in Florida. And, you know, he was saying that when he came to Osceola, they did not get Medicaid reimbursement, and they had about a student population of about 2,000 students. And they identified them, got that Medicaid reimbursement. It was over $1 million. That's amazing.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of districts, they have traditionally been discouraged, or at least discouraged themselves from going after that money because it requires a lot of reporting. But we see now, in terms of the Wi-Fi, in terms of student ridership tracking, the technology is there now that can compile all this information, submit reports for you, so that folks can go after this. Long have heard that Medicaid is one of the biggest underutilized programs for school transportation. I know Alex Robinson talked about Medicaid as well during her session on uncovering funding sources out in Frisco last month. So, it's always been interesting to me. We've written articles and we've done specific sessions about Medicaid, and just the numbers don't turn out for whatever reason. And I think it's because, again, a lot of folks traditionally have not done it because they either don't have, there's very set certain criteria for a student to qualify for Medicaid funding to begin with. And either the districts aren't providing that form of transportation to services or medical therapy or whatnot for these districts that fit that Medicaid criteria, or again, they're just discouraged from applying. So hopefully, getting the word out on how technology can help will start to move that needle.
Yeah, I know on the panel as well was Ryan Dillingham, the director of transportation at Knox County out in Tennessee. And, they had an interesting situation where tablets were not allowed on their school buses because of a horrific accident that happened many, many years ago. And, that prevented him from taking advantage of Medicaid reimbursement. And now that the rule has basically been lifted that he can have tablets again, this conversation while we're sitting on the panel, he was like, yeah, I want Medicaid reimbursement too. And he had about the same population of special needs students as Arby did. And, and there's a million reasons to go out and get those tablets. And it's, helps justify the expense for sure. And Cody Cox over at Cleveland ISD was also there in Texas. He talked about taking advantage of Medicaid as well. And he said it was about $500,000 or so that they were getting. So it always varies, the funding based on the student and the need and the services delivered. But regardless, you have those panelists were talking about it. And that was just kind of an off the cuff discussion. And I felt like it was very interesting. A lot of wide eyes, a lot of note taking in the audience around this possibility to find some money. And that's money in perpetuity. This isn't just one-time money. This is money every year that you're going to get, and you put it back in the classroom. Upgrade the technology on your school buses. I know y'all can use a little more money in the budget. Everybody's complaining they don't have money. Here's some money. I'm gonna call it free money because you got to do some work to get it, but it's definitely low hanging fruit. That's for sure.
Now, it was interesting when that comment was made that Tennessee prohibited tablets because of that 2016 Chattanooga crash. Jonathan E. Walker was a contracted driver, and there was cell phone use, right? He wasn't using a tablet, but it was just that knee-jerk reaction that too often we see because of distraction. Well, let's ban anything that can be a distraction. Well, the biggest distraction that we hear from drivers are the children themselves. And so if you look at adding Wi-Fi, we know that, anecdotally, we hear a lot of cases of seatbelt use. I know that's a bad word for a lot of folks in the industry, but to a T, the folks we talk to, they say that when they implement seatbelts, behavior improves. But, and then in the meantime, we all have tablets embedded in our cars, or at least the newest ones on the road, and there's a lot of functionality that you're not able to do in our cars that when the vehicle's in motion. To a T, all the tablets that are available for school buses have that option, if not standard, that go, dark when the vehicle is in motion. So again, I think it's this fear of technology and fear of unintended consequences that unfortunately drives these decisions away from implementing a lot of these things that can really prove to be very beneficial.
All right, Ryan, great conversation. Excited to get you into that conversation with Al Karam from Shenendehowa Central School District in New York. Take it away, my friend.
I want to welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage, Al Karam, Director of Transportation for Shenendehowa Central School District in Clifton Park, New York. If you were able to watch, you would see Al nodding, giving his nod of approval to me because I was just playing with the pronunciation. But Shenendehowa. Now, where does that name come from? Is that
it's an Indian? It's the Indians tribes who used to live in this area.
Yeah, I was going to ask because it sounded like to me, because I know a lot of, especially in upstate New York. So you're just north of Albany, next to Schenectady, and so a lot of the tribes, their names live on in school districts or in counties up there. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful. It's actually end of November as we're recording this. We'll be listening to this in School Transportation Nationland in the beginning of December. Al, I want to launch in, and first let's learn a little more about you. I've known you for a few years now, and I know your first career before you came over to school transportation, you were a U.S. Marine, 25 years that you served. Tell the audience a little bit about you, your background.
Sure, and I appreciate that for mentioning that. First of all, I'm an immigrant from Lebanon. I immigrated to this country when I was 11 years old with my family. And as soon as I turned 17, I joined the Marine Corps, following in the footsteps of my older brother, who was also a Marine. He did 23 years. I ended up doing 25 years, couple of months and a few days, reaching the rank of Master Gunnery Sergeant, which is the highest enlisted side rank that you can go, next to the Sergeant Major. In the Marine Corps, my occupational specialty was transportation. On the tactical side, heavy transportation, 5-ton trucks, deuce and a halves, the logistics vehicle system, they call them dragon wagons. So that's where I cut my teeth at in transportation. And as you know, the military, it's a people's organization. So as a leader, as you begin to climb up in rank, and they put you in charge of sections and then squads and platoons and companies and that sort of thing, you begin to get a lot of experience dealing with the human side of the military, if you will. And on top of that, being in transportation, I've served at the platoon, company, battalion level. The biggest battalion I was a part of had about 1,200 Marines in it, and 900 pieces of rolling stock, and that was the 3rd Sport Battalion when I was at Okinawa, Japan. But I did some other things outside of transportation while I was in the Marine Corps. I was a drill instructor 2 different times for a total of about 7.5 years. That's where we take, young men and women and indoctrinate them into the love of core country. As we say in the Marine Corps, we don't train them, we indoctrinate them and make Marines out of them for life, by the way. And besides that, I had an opportunity to go on a special mission to Mauritania, West Africa, as part of an 11-man mobile training team to help that country establish its Marine Corps. And that's all I'll get into, with that. Basically, there was a lot that went into that. We lived in the desert, trained in the desert, and that was a really great experience, even from a logistics perspective, if you will, putting that package together, going to a remote part of the world, and having to live there for almost 3 months. We had to think through that a lot to make it happen. And my last duty station, I was the deputy director of the Staff Non-Commissioned Officers Academy at Quantico, Virginia, which is the premier professional military education academy for sergeants, staff sergeants, gunnery sergeants, and first sergeants, master sergeants in the Marine Corps. So I had the opportunity to do that for about 3 years.
Just a litany mountain of great experience. Thank you for your service. Again, I know you've shared some of your story with me in the past, so I was privy to it. I knew you had a logistics background, which a lot of folks, whether they're coming from military or private sector, find their way into student transportation. So you obviously retired from the U.S. Marines. I think it was in the late 90s. How did you make the transition then to school transportation?
Great question. So I did retire in 1999. I initially got a job working for a law firm that was specializing in debt reduction. It was the first law firm in the United States to actually get into that kind of a business. And, how the heck would a Marine whose transportation is the background work for a law firm? Again, dealing with people, problem solving, quality management, the whole basket of things. I was brought in to help run the client service side and the debt reduction side of the house and help that organization, become more profitable. So I did that for 9 months, and my brother, one of my younger brothers, sent me a job announcement in the paper that Bethlehem Central School District was looking for an assistant director. I said, this is really what I want to do. Transportation, that's been my life. So let me give it a shot. And here's the one thing, and I'm sure you've heard that many times before. No one ever thinks about the yellow buses. That is a profession that we ought to be looking at and getting into. So I kind of stumbled into it, if you will, but it was perfect, right? It was transportation, which was my specialty in the military. It's people-centric, which, again, I haven't spent many years in the military as a leader, in charge of people, leading people. It was just right up my alley. Maintenance. I ran maintenance shops while I was in the Marines as well. So it was the complete package. And fortunately for me, I was hired in June of 2000 to be the assistant director for Bethlehem Central Schools, which is about 25 miles south of us here. And 2 years later, I was the director. I did total 14 years with Bethlehem, and then I moved up here to Shenendehowa as a director for the past 9.5 years.
Well, excellent, and having that drill sergeant background too, I think that helps both in at the legal company and then in transportation. Sometimes proverbially knocking some heads together to get folks on the right path. But in terms of your leadership, I'm on your LinkedIn page often, and you always have great articles or thoughts that you're sharing. And I know that leadership is a really big thing with you. And in talking to you previously, you learned a lot of that. Obviously, 25 years in the Marines, and you're an award-winning Marine too. I mean, you've won a number of awards over your service years. Obviously, that just kind of, by osmosis, it crafts you into becoming a great leader. Talk about that transition from the Marines to transportation. You're obviously, no longer can you command people like you once could in the Marines. What was that transition like? How did you apply some of those lessons learned from the Marines to student transportation?
Sure. So the transition, what for me wasn't difficult, but I'm often reminded that, hey, you're not in the Marines anymore. And I think part of the issue with that is, especially in the Marine Corps, especially with my background in the Marine Corps, being a drill instructor, being a leader, we have to, as Marine leaders, we have to show that command presence. We develop that, and that's where you're able to command, 70, 100, 200, 500 people. When you say something, you're going to snap to. It's that command presence, right? And I think if you look at that, you can say, well, that's a weakness because the command presence intimidates people. On the other hand, the positive side about it is that command presence also snaps people's attention mentally to get them to pay attention, because we are in a safety sensitive profession, right? And I don't sugarcoat anything. I go straight at the heart of the problem and, share the solutions. And then the expectation are that, we follow the laws, rules, regulations, policies, and procedures, and everything will be fine.
Absolutely. And then, I see a lot of innovation from Shenendehowa as well. Just a couple of things that jumped off the top of my head. I know several years ago, we wrote about LGBTQ training program for school bus drivers, and I believe attendants too, on bullying. Obviously our society has changed a lot over the last several decades, especially in terms of of just a lot of social issues that may have been buried or may have been in the shadows before, now coming out, and rightfully so, people being able to live their lives. But just taking that approach and having the foresight, and I know that there was some training that came out of the People Transportation Safety Institute around this. I'm not sure if that was where you got the idea, or if you, in working with them, you implemented that.
Yeah, actually, yes, we did that. And just stepping back a couple of steps. So, in transportation, we really have the older demographics still, the baby boomers, what have you. They're predominantly still in these positions of drivers, bus attendants, what have you. And you're right. The conversation in the country is changing, and we need to stay abreast of that. And when that program was put together by PTSI, and I believe the New York Association of People Transportation was involved with it, and they were, putting it out there, we were one of the first to jump on that, and we brought in the speaker to speak to that, particular topic, because we need to have a conversation on these issues. We need to be aware, because we also have students who identify as LGBTQ plus. And, we, as adults, we have to have an open mind, and in order to, work with the students that are under our charge to make sure, everyone's having a safe ride home back and forth every day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Protection goes beyond simply getting them in the yellow bus and making sure they get safely to and from, but it's, protection of their psyche as well. Take us through real quickly, an overview of Shenendehowa's operations. What are we looking at in terms of fleet size, number of students transported, number of school bus drivers?
So Shenendehowa Central School is about 88 square miles when you're looking at the school district itself. When I first started, we had about 10,500 and some odd students. We're down to slightly below 10,000 right now, by like maybe 30 students. We have a fleet of 217 buses. About 150 some odd of them are Type Cs. About 50 some odd buses are Type A's, and we have 5 Suburbans. We have 2 shifts of mechanics to maintain the fleet. The fleet is predominantly diesel powered. There are some gasoline. The district did at one time have CNG, and I know they tested a hybrid bus at one time, but that did not work out for them. We transport on average every day about 6,300 students. And just to kind of like also set, how many of the students are eligible for transportation. Every student in our school district is eligible for transportation, even if they live right across the street from a school. So it's 100% eligibility, and that's what we route every year for each and every student.
Okay.
We go to close to about 40 schools outside of our school district. These are private placements, private schools, parochial, and or special education schools that we transport to.
Gotcha. In terms of driver shortage, I mean, I've been covering this industry now for 20 years. And when I first started, they were talking about driver shortage. And certainly it's been exacerbated by COVID. Getting back to a little bit about your leadership too, as well. What does that look like in Shenendehowa?
So we are, unlike other places, we have a severe driver shortage. On an average day here, since we came out of COVID, we have to cover about 35. This is an average day, about 35 open positions. We started the school year with about 20 open positions, simply didn't have drivers for them. And then you factor in drivers who are out short-term sick, personal leave, or long-term sick. The other 2 days ago, we had 47 open positions. So how are we coping with that? Well, we intentionally built in the blocks, the morning blocks and the afternoon blocks of our routing scheme, we built time so that the drivers who are here can have time to cover the open routes that we have to cover every day. And of course, that scenario changes based on who's in, who's out. We're able to keep our head above water. But I can tell you our experience here, we went from interviewing about almost 80 people a year. We're down to less than 30 interviews per year. That is not sustainable. Matter of fact, we're having a meeting tomorrow at the district level with the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, to talk specifically about the driver shortage, because it is getting worse as each day, each week, each month goes by. It's not getting any better.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, we've obviously there's a lot of other options out there for employees, especially hourly. What do you feel has been the pressure that is most affecting you?
Well, I think there's two things happening here. Earlier, I mentioned that school transportation is predominantly the older demographics. These folks, and I outlined this to our administration maybe 5 years ago or so, that we had about 75 employees that could leave at any time, drivers at any time. They've got the age. They're vested in the system for retirement, health benefits, and what have you. And that has happened. On an average, around 22, 25 drivers a year are turning over for these reasons. And as the older demographic steps out, the younger demographics is not coming in. The foot traffic has dried up. And no matter how you package, and I just did a survey in the capital region here to see, who's paying, for example, bonuses, who's paying training. We pay training, but we pay you after you work for us for the school year, because we have to protect our investment, where other people pay you as you go through training. Well, I can show you my data that's a losing proposition, because the majority of the people you bring on training never finish. The majority of them, and it's pretty high. The data shows that the percentages are pretty high. So there's a lot of factors here. Is it pay? I would say right now it's beginning to turn, where the private industry is paying a whole lot more. For example, the average diesel mechanic here in the capital region makes $35 an hour with 5 years experience, where, we're bringing you in at $24, $25 an hour. That's not tenable, for the long haul on the mechanic side, which, by the way, we're short on by a couple of mechanics. So we have to figure a way to bring the next generation, the people in their 20s, in their 30s, 40s. We can't continue dependent on simply the retirees or the stay-at-home, which have been really the traditional folks in school transportation, the stay-at-home parents and the retirees. It's just not working anymore.
Well, good luck with it. I know a lot of folks are still dealing with it. But this all, the leads me to the $60,000 question. Maybe it's that dates us, Al, I think, with the $60,000 question. I think people say 60 million now, but old game shows, folks. Looking at New York specifically, you guys led the nation, not you specifically, but your politicians down the road in Albany decided that they were going to implement a zero emission school bus requirement that we've obviously written and talked a lot about. 2027 is the date when all school districts' new purchases have to be zero emissions. The whole fleets have to be turned over by 2035. We've talked about this. I know that you are a big fan of diesel. What is your plan? How are you going to tackle this?
Well, great question. And that is a subject I talk about all the time. I've given presentations on. You saw the article, I think, I put on LinkedIn here about the roses and the thorns, about electric vehicles. So what are we doing to meet that? Well, the first thing we did, we have to comply with the mandate. So we have to dip our toes in the water. We did what everybody's saying to do, hey, get your analysis done on, your fleet and what it's going to take electric-wise and the type of chargers. And this is what we found out. So Shenendehowa, the majority of our schools, with the exception of 4, is a campus. It rivals a lot of colleges in size, right? So we have 2 megawatts of power coming into our campus. The 4 buses that we're bringing in and the 2 chargers that will eventually be installed for them, each one will be 60 kilowatts, is going to wipe away that remaining kilowatts that we currently have, that excess kilowatts, to operate these chargers. So right now we're at a standstill, right? The 4 buses are going to come in eventually sometime next year, probably by the summer. There are some other regulatory hurdles that were thrown in our face. One of them was trying to get an SED approval to install the 2 60 kilowatt chargers. That's kind of like on the back burner right now, going through the slow governmental process. So meanwhile, in order to keep this project moving, we are bidding out for 2 50 kilowatt portable chargers that we will use in the shop and charge those 4 buses with. So moving to the timeline that you talked about, in order for us to continue buying electric buses, we need to bring electric service onto the campus. So we have a midterm, mid-goal, if you will, and a long-term goal. The midterm is to bring in one more power line that would give us enough power, like probably 2.5 more megawatts, that will power 84 buses. And then after that, we need an electrical substation to be built on the campus to handle the rest of the fleet, so we can have 217 buses that are electric. So bringing the one line in, you're looking at 2-3 years to get that done. The substation, anywhere from 3 to 5 years to get that done. And if you look at the timeline that New York State has and our needs and the timeline for construction and approvals and all that, there's no way we're going to meet the 2027. And we may end up going maybe 2-3 years not buying buses of any sort, right, until this equation of power needs is addressed.
Yeah. I was going to, ask you, one of the things we're tracking are a lot of districts going to defer on the replacement, which of course is like, it flies in the face of what the regulators, the EPA, and these different states are trying to do, is get these, quote unquote, dirtier diesel off the road. Although, and what's your average fleet age, by the way?
So the average age right now is about 6.3. Okay.
So average buses are already, 90 to 95% cleaner than pre-2010. So, they're already very clean. But in terms of if you're going to have to defer your purchases, that's not good. I was going to ask if there's been any conversation about, I would imagine we're going to see some extensions provided. I mean, I just don't see how.
In the mandate, it actually allows for 2 1-year extensions. So if 2027 you can't buy electric buses, you got to give them a reason why.
Yeah.
And then you can do it for another year. And I do believe they're also asking for school districts to submit, starting August 2025, a report as to what have you done for training, what have you done for purchasing, what have you done for the infrastructure, so the state can compile this, because I do believe they also see the writing on the wall that their timeline is just not going to work. And if I may say so, the politicians really put the cart in front of the horse. They say, here's all this money, go buy your buses, go buy the chargers, and that's it. When they should have been addressing the power generation and the power needs of there are districts that are so far flung out there. This is what they're telling us, right? Because they've had conversations with their power suppliers. They're not going to get electricity. So you tell me then, if they're not going to get electricity, how are they going to flip their fleet to all electric? And that's the crux of the issue, is the cart is in front of the horse. Put the money where it's needed first, build that infrastructure, then bring in the buses and the chargers.
My loyal readers and audience listeners out there, I think that cart before the horse, I think that's been in the pages of STN a couple times, talking about that very thing. So it was interesting, as you were talking about this just the other day, a report came out there in New York, the New York Independent System Operators. They cited, quote, greater uncertainty, unquote, about how much electricity will be needed in the future and how it will be supplied. So they're talking about the grid system, and that the needs are far outstripping the capacity right now. So we know that millions and billions of dollars have to be put into our grid nationwide to get us to where we need to go. You have your work cut out for you, my friend. There's so much we could talk for hours. There's so much more we can talk about. Definitely, I think we'll definitely have to continue the conversation, talk about technology. I know your assistant director, Belinda Govich, has an article coming out in our January issue on discipline. And I know that was a topic that you talked about at NAPT last month in October. Just oodles of good stuff, good content, good ideas coming out of your operations. Really appreciate it, Al. We'll definitely ping you soon and tap into that mind of yours and have you share more about what's going on at Shenendehowa Central School District.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan. Always a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on your podcast, and looking forward to having more conversations.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Al.
You got it, sir.
Hey, special thanks, Ryan, Al, Karam, jumping on the podcast. Have a great conversation there today. Interesting topics we discussed. Guys, want to thank our sponsor, TransFinder, for always sponsoring the STN podcast every year. We are riding with them all the way to the finish line of 2024 here. We're coming up soon. A couple episodes less before. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, all that good stuff. So excited to round out the year here. It's been excellent. We appreciate you, nation. We thank you for being readers loyal all through and throughout the year. Don't forget stnonline.com for all the latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. Always great topics up on the site. We got some great holiday content too, so if you want to see some buses up there with lights and fun and holiday spirit, we got you covered. Don't forget, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Nation, we love you. We'll see you next week.